Hey guys, I thought I'll make a quick video to just now that we've had a few days to digest the implications of the US election, what it might mean for American LNG and what it might mean for the world LNG and the gas industry as a whole. Um, First, I like to say it is a bit of a shock. The results were completely unexpected, as you can imagine. I've been talking to lots of my friends and colleagues in the States, and everybody's a bit taken aback. No one really expected the result. It just goes to show that a lot of the media, a lot of the talking heads on TV, they tend to kind of repeat each other, and in the end of the day, they often get it wrong together. If it's one person's going to get it wrong, just like they're repeating each other, they'll all get it wrong. And I think no one really expected the results that it did. I saw a very telling map today that actually showed the voting by county in the US, and it's it's quite mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling because it just shows that Trump won nearly all the counties in the US. He may not have won all the states because all the big cities, especially on the East Coast and the West Coast, all those cities went to Kamala Harris. But it is quite amazing when you look at the geographic spread of the counties that Trump actually won. It goes through all the states, all of the California apart from the coast, all of Colorado except for the Denver area, all of upstate New York, all of these places that yes, New York may have gone for Kamala Harris, but when you break it down by county, you realize that Trump actually won nearly geographically 80 90% of the US geographically. Of course, that doesn't mean population wise, but it just tells you how the local concerns in all these places permeated well and resonated well with the Trump supporters much more than with the Kamala Harris supporters. So I think that's one thing that's quite interesting. I talked to some folks in Louisiana this morning, and everybody's very pleased because Louisiana is one of those states that just feels that they can benefit. What actually surprised me, of course, is there's a lot of poor people in Louisiana, and some of them would have benefited potentially from some of the Democratic policies. But for whatever reason, they also tended to support, or a lot of them supported Trump. So the message has gone through. It just shows the power of communication and clarity. So what does this really mean for the industry? Well, on the most basic sense, even what he said in his inauguration speech or in his acceptance speech that night of the election, he said, we're just going to drill, baby, drill. So from the upstream side of things, I do expect a resurgence in the U.S. Gas production. I shouldn't use the word resurgence because it's actually been producing quite a lot, and it's actually a record production. But it may be more unconstrained record production. But what that, of course, means is that the US being such a large liquid domestic gas market, gas prices will come down. And naturally, when gas prices come down, gas producers tend to produce less. So it might self correct itself. But I think we'll see less government interference in the upstream side of things. The government is a massive landowner through the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, for the onshore, and controls all the deep water offshore as well. So if those restrictions get lifted, we might just see a bit more investment in the upstream. When we see more investment in the upstream, that obviously will bring down gas prices, and that will bring down feed gas prices. I think further cementing America's role as one of the lowest cost LNG producers. From the pipelines and the LNG side of things, I think it's going to be definitely a plus. We have had a lot of uncertainty over the last couple of years. Uncertainty over the permits, such as Texas LNG and the Rio Grande project, where you get the permit and then they take it away because the court decided against it. Uncertainty over the Biden pause, which was completely, I think, unlawful and unjustified. And to have a blanket pause like that, it really did mess up the industry and it hurt America's reputation. So I think we won't have any of that kind of silliness going forward. Uh, but is it going to be complete government hands off? Obviously not. We have a very robust permitting system. The FERC system is a very well established system. And I expect that we'll still have to comply with it. And we will comply with it, of course. But we may not have to deal with a lot of the distractions. I would think that some of the anti development folks, and I think we all know who they are going to have to pick their battles very carefully. Right now, they're picking all the battles. Every LNG project, every pipeline gets lawsuits and gets comments from these guys, no matter how good or bad the project is. In my own project, which is the Gulf Stream project in Louisiana, we are 50 miles from the coast, and one of the anti-development folks wrote us a long letter how we should be concerned about the deep water whales. which live in 400 feet or 150 meters and more. So, I'm on a river 50 miles from the sea, and the sea is very shallow for another 100, 200 miles out. And suddenly the whales that live in the deep water Gulf of Mexico, I have to worry about them as well. So these kind of, I think, we kind of lost the plot a little bit, and we let the anti-development folks kind of control a lot of the message. I think that's going to bring back into control. I don't expect the anti-development folks to go away, and they shouldn't go away. They serve a very important role to keep us all honest, to make sure that we do all the right things. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the concerns they raise are actually genuine concerns. Raising an issue of whales for an onshore river project doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I think that those guys are going to have to pick their battles, and they will pick the certain battle, but they can't pick all the battles. Are they still going to get a lot of support? I think they'll get a lot less support and donations, because in the end of the day, they're not going to be able to be as visible as they are. And their whole strategy is based on visibility. If you're in the public eye and you talk about fracking, you talk about this and you talk about that, well, that obviously you tend to raise more donations that way. In my last video, I did talk about fracking. I just want to mention that again, because I think it's a really, really important point. The rest of the world thinks that fracking is the most horrible, dangerous thing there is. We have all been told that by the guys screaming on the top of their lungs, hanging themselves off the paintings and throwing soup at Da Vinci and all those other kind of crazy stunts that they've done. Chain linking themselves to the highways. But in the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, does this really make a lot of sense? In Pennsylvania, which was one of the most battleground states, the states that everybody looked at, the state that probably fracks secondly only to Texas or Oklahoma, all the gas in Pennsylvania is really fracked gas, because it's all shale gas. It was not an issue. None of the politicians talked about it, the left or the right. If it was such a big issue, then they all should be talking about it, one for it, one against it, but there was no discussion about it for all purposes. So, the rest of the world really has to had a hard look at its own navel and decide, why are we banning fracking in Australia? Why are we banning fracking in Europe? Why are we banning fracking in the UK? All that stuff. We believe the juice of the anti-development folks that told us that fracking is bad, when they really should just go to Pennsylvania and said, hey, if it was so bad, why was it not discussed in the elections? Because it really wasn't an issue at all. So anyway, back to the thing. So what are the implications of the election? Well, I think that the US LNG permitting system will be better defined. We expect a number of FIDs to happen in the next 6 months. Commonwealth, Texas LNG, a few of the expansions. These are all CP2. I mean, these things are going to start going ahead. I think that's quite exciting. We'll have to see. I think we'll see less American interference, government interference in the exports of LNG. So we'll be able to export, wherever it makes a lot of sense. I think that the rest of the LNG producers of the world should be worried. Qatar and Abu Dhabi took full advantage of the pause to get their own projects off the ground. Good for them. But I think America is back now, and American LNG is going to come back with a force. And more LNG in the world means lower prices of LNG. Lower prices means more people get out of the energy poverty that they're in Africa, in Asia. When 50, 70, 80% of the population in Africa still does not have steady electricity or cooking fuel, then this is a good thing. American exporting more LNG is going to be a good thing, because we tend to export to everywhere without destination restrictions. And as the world gets more flexible, America is the most flexible producer of them all, especially when we sell so much to the trading companies that then give the flexibility to the customers, because the poorer nations can afford it. These poor nations cannot sign 20-year offtake deals with Qatar at 12% of Brent, but they can sign 1 or 2 cargo deals with Glencore or with Vitol, and Vitol can get their gas from America because there's no destination restrictions, and they can get the LNG relatively cheap, and they can then sell it at a good price to the markets that need it and displace dirty fuels like coal. So I think as a whole, the world should be happy that there'll be more American LNG, be more volume. More volumes means lower prices, and lower prices mean we'll see LNG going into transportation, into the bunkering fuel, into all these things that right now, it's a sensitivity of economics is there. Of course, if I was in the hydrogen business or the ammonia business, I would be worried. A lot of that stuff only made a lot of sense with subsidies from the government, especially the US government. Those subsidies are going to go away. And maybe they should. Maybe these projects all should stand by itself. My LNG project doesn't get subsidies. Why should the hydrogen project get subsidies? If it's so good, let the customer pay more for that clean fuel. So I think that maybe levels the playing field. And in a level playing field, I think some of these more esoteric fuels such as hydrogen, etc., are not going to make a lot of sense. But back to the US LNG industry, we might see higher development costs because we might see less labor, because if the labor, the illegal, the undocumented labor gets taken away, then suddenly labor price in the US may rise, and that may impact. There's a lot of talk of tariffs. If there is talk on steel tariffs, which I think is one of the top things, there will be tariff, then steel prices will go up. Steel prices are one of the major components of an LNG project or in shipbuilding project or any other big project, pipeline project. So I expect those costs to potentially go up. Is there going to be a tariff on fully developed modules? Most of the American projects today are modular, with the modules being built in Europe or in Asia. Are we going to see those prices go up with the tariff involved? If so, that may not be a good thing. And of course, the big thing out of them all is what happens to retaliatory tariffs. If the U.S. government starts tariffing China for all the stuff that we import from China, then is China going to start importing American LNG? Now, one can say that doesn't make a lot of sense, because American LNG, keeping it low price for the Chinese consumer, helps China's economy and helps China's export more. But the world of tariff doesn't always make a lot of sense. So I think there is going to be some downside, but overall, the stability is what we like. I would like to think there'll be stability. I would like to think that the U.S. government is going to kind of keep its hands off the energy of the oil and gas business and make it easier for us to understand the rules and follow the rules, as opposed to random blocks and pauses and court case challenges against permits that were issued many, many years ago. I would like to think that that'll all help give some confidence. We're talking about billions and millions of dollars of investment. We want to make sure those investments are locked in and the taxes don't arbitrarily rise and the projects can go ahead when they're expecting to. So I think we'll expect more of that. We might see more consolidation. I don't know what consolidation we can see in the LNG business, but obviously we have a lot of different players in the US. Maybe there is time for some consolidation. I'm hoping for Gulfstream LNG. This will get some of my investors off the fence. A couple of investors have told me that they can't do anything till the election is resolved. I'd like to think they should be calling us now. We have seen the value of LNG companies go up dramatically in the last couple of days. NextDecade prices have gone up. Cheniere prices have gone up. And that's all good. So let's just see what the world leads. But I think it's interesting times ahead of us. But I think American LNG is definitely going to be a bigger force to be reckoned with. If I was an LNG project developer outside America, I'd be worried, because there'll be a lot more American LNG coming. FIDs will happen. Projects will get built with less red tape. Permits will get issued. And feed gas will be cheap. And in the end of the day, who benefits? The rest of the world benefits, because they get cheap gas and keeps the energy transition happening. Cheaper gas allows us to displace coal, allows us to displace diesel, and that's only good for everybody. Hope this was interesting. Thanks, everyone. Bye.